Unirock versus Pajarito. Today, we're diving into the absolute limits of management prerogative. Welcome to The Explainer. So, picture this. Out of nowhere, your boss tells you to pack up your entire life and move across the country. And when you ask for just a few extra days to get your family sorted, boom, you're fired. It sounds wild, right? But it actually happened. Today, we are exploring a real-life case that perfectly highlights the tug-of-war between a company's right to run its business and, well, basic human fairness. We're going to find out exactly where a standard workplace transfer crosses the line and becomes an illegal dismissal. To get to the bottom of this, we need to meet our guy, Eduardo Pajarito. Eduardo was a heavy equipment operator for Unirock Corporation. He got hired way back in March of 1999, making a daily wage of 258 pesos. He was just a regular, hardworking guy, putting in the hours. For 6 solid years, no major issues at all. Until one day, a sudden corporate order completely flipped his life upside down and kicked off a massive legal battle. Now, pay close attention to this timeline, because it is the absolute linchpin of this whole dispute. On March 14, 2005, Unirock's HR vice president hits Eduardo with a transfer order. The effective date, March 17th, literally just 3 days later. Eduardo writes them a letter on the 19th trying to reason with them, but things spiral out of control fast, and by March 31st, he's totally out of a job. Keep that lightning-fast timeline in mind. To really wrap our heads around how crazy a 3-day notice is, let's look at the map. Unirock wasn't just asking Eduardo to commute to the next town over. They were transferring him from Metro Manila all the way down to the province of Davao in Mindanao. Now, they did offer him a 1,000 peso monthly relocation allowance, a 50 peso daily meal allowance, and they covered his travel fare. But come on, think about the logistics here. You've got 72 hours to uproot your entire family, find a new place, pack your life into boxes, and move across the country. That is a massive undertaking. Understandably, Eduardo was pretty overwhelmed. But here's the thing, he didn't outright refuse to go. Instead, on March 19th, he wrote this really genuine, heartfelt letter to management. He practically begged for just a tiny 2-week extension. Why? Well, his young kids were finishing up their school year on April 1st, and he didn't have any relatives in Manila to leave them with. He literally just needed to wait until their summer vacation started. It was a completely understandable plea from a dad just trying to do the right thing for his kids. So, how do you think Unirock handled that? Did they give him the 2 weeks? Nope, not even close. They completely ignored his request. Instead, they slapped him with a demand to explain why he wasn't in Davao yet. And by March 31st, they hit him with a formal memorandum of termination. The official reasons: willful disobedience for not packing up immediately and abandonment of work. Just like that, boom, 6 years of loyal service completely gone. Naturally, Eduardo fought back. He filed an illegal dismissal complaint, and man, this triggered an absolute roller coaster in the legal system. It was like watching a game of legal ping pong. First, the labor arbiter said, yep, the firing was totally valid. Then the National Labor Relations Commission, or NLRC, stepped in and reversed it, calling it an illegal dismissal. But wait, it gets weirder. Unirock filed a motion, and the NLRC issued a second decision, out of nowhere, claiming Eduardo was actually retrenched. Finally, the whole mess landed on the desk of the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals had to do some serious house cleaning, starting with that bizarre retrenchment ruling. They tossed that theory right out the window. See, legally, if a company wants to retrench or lay off workers, they have to prove they're suffering substantial financial losses, and they have to notify the Department of Labor and Employment a month in advance. Unirock didn't do any of that. They didn't even use retrenchment as their own defense. So the court correctly steered things back to Unirock's actual main argument, gross insubordination. Okay, let's get into the nuts and bolts of the law for a second. Under Article 297 of the Labor Code, which used to be Article 282, an employer absolutely has the right to fire an employee for serious misconduct or the willful disobedience of a lawful work order. And that makes sense, right? It's the bedrock of management prerogative. Bosses need to be able to direct their teams. But that right isn't a blank check. To legally fire someone for disobedience, a company has to prove 2 very strict overlapping requirements. Number 1, the employee's behavior has to be truly willful or intentional, like a genuinely perverse, defiant mental attitude. And number 2, the actual order being violated has to be reasonable and lawful. Both of those boxes absolutely must be checked. So let's hold Eduardo's actions up to that legal magnifying glass. When the case finally made its way up to the Supreme Court, they looked at that second requirement, the reasonableness of the order, and they found Unirock totally dropped the ball. Yes, transferring an employee is a valid management right, but expecting a guy to coordinate a cross-country move from Manila to Davao in just 3 days? The court said that completely defies basic justice and fair play. A move like that requires a decent amount of time to figure out serious family logistics. So straight out of the gate, the order itself was fundamentally unreasonable.
And what about that first requirement? Was Eduardo acting defiant? The Supreme Court basically said absolutely not. And this is such a crucial nuance in labor law. Asking to negotiate is not mutiny. Eduardo never stubbornly refused to go to Davao. He was literally just asking to push the date to April 1st so his little kids could finish school. The court made it super clear that a normal, understandable parental plea like that doesn't even come close to a perverse mental attitude or intentional defiance.
Unirock wasn't going down without a fight, though. They had a backup defense ready to go. They argued, hey, if it's not insubordination, then it's abandonment. They claimed that because Eduardo wasn't at his old post in Manila and he hadn't shown up in Davao between March 17th and the 30th, he essentially went AWOL. In their view, he just walked away from his job entirely, which gave them a totally separate, valid reason to fire him. But just like disobedience, abandonment has its own very strict legal hurdles. An employer can't just say, well, he wasn't here. You have to prove 2 things. First, an unjustified failure to report for work. Second, and this is the big one, a clear, overt intention from the employee to permanently sever the employment relationship. You have to prove that the worker absolutely wanted to walk away from their livelihood for good. The Supreme Court took one glance at the timeline and completely dismantled Unirock's abandonment claim. I mean, think about it. You don't fight tooth and nail for a job you're actively trying to abandon. Eduardo actually filed a request for conciliation and mediation on March 18th before he was even officially fired because he was terrified his rights were being violated. And the literal minute he got fired, he sued for illegal dismissal. The court rightly pointed out that taking immediate legal action is the exact opposite of abandoning your job. It shows you desperately want it back. Now, here's the part that is just tough to swallow. Even though Eduardo was legally in the right, the wheels of justice turn painfully slow. This entire dispute, which, remember, started over a simple 2-week extension for some kids to finish school, took a mind-boggling 15 years to resolve. He was fired in 2005, and the Supreme Court's final decision didn't come down until 2020. That is a decade and a half of waiting in limbo, just because a guy wanted to balance his job and his family. But finally, the verdict arrived, and it was total vindication for Eduardo. Illegal dismissal. Because 15 years had gone by, the court decided giving him his old job back didn't really make sense anymore. Instead, they hit Unirock where it hurts. They ordered the company to pay massive compensation, separation pay equal to 1 month for every year he worked, plus a staggering 15 years of full back wages, every single peso he would have earned from the day he was fired until the final decision. Talk about an insanely heavy financial consequence for refusing a simple 14-day extension. So, as we wrap up Eduardo Pajarito's incredible 15-year battle today, I want you to think about the environment in your own industry. Where do we draw that true line between a company's totally valid right to optimize operations and a worker's fundamental right to basic human fairness? Because if this explainer proves anything, it's that having the legal right to run your business doesn't give you the right to run it cruelly. Management prerogative ends exactly where basic justice and fair play begin. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking these tough questions, and I'll catch you on the next one.